and really, really appreciate the time that we do have here on the earth and we have to be with each other and the time that we have to impact each other's lives. Now, again, that's no scare tactic, but the Lord is very clear that the thing that is promised to us is to live and then to die. And even the thing that's promised to us, probably more certain in Hebrews and Corinthians in death, is that we'll be judged. And he says, so it is appointed for every man to die. And after this, the judgment. And so for those who are believers in Jesus Christ, there's nothing scary about that. In fact, it's good. We used to always say in our house, we would say something like, oh man, that's that's almost as bad as dying or something. And I remember Julia as a youngster would say, well, it's not that bad to die, is it? And we would say, well, I guess technically it's not. And so I appreciate you. I just wanted to definitely say that. I appreciate all of your prayers. I know that you were. Um, as I was able to get on 2 feet and move around, I'd see Monty on Wednesday nights and she was like, I'm praying for you and I want to know when you're coming back, right? And I really appreciate that because that's encouragement to keep moving. And again, this is just a knee injury. It doesn't have anything to do with my heart or my brain. But it's just good to know that other folks were thinking about me and praying for me. It's just huge. So I really appreciate you. If you could turn over to Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3. We'll be there and try not to stray too much from it, at least in the text that you're holding on to. Exodus chapter 3. I'm pretty sure everyone in here has had a splinter before. That's a splinter in your finger or something like that. They're pretty, especially when you're a kid, they're pretty rough. But if you remember, probably the first time you had a splinter, maybe your parent, if you can remember, they probably said, "Hey, come here, let me get that out for you," right? And they probably got it out. But after they get it out the first time, the next time you have a splinter, about the last person you want to go to is your parent, right? Because what is ingrained in your head is how crazy of an experience that was. It's like horrifying for a child. And this happened with Julia, my oldest daughter. I remember the first time she got a splinter in her finger, I remember picking it out myself. And I was like, look how tough you are. And she was just like, yeah, and it's just one single tear. And she just gets it out and she's like, thank you. She was little and she felt really good about that. And I was like, wow, I can't believe she just toughed through that, right? And the next time she got a splinter, she got it in her toe. And I was like, oh, you got a splinter? Well, no big deal. Just go lay on your bed and I'll be in there in a second and I'll take it out, just like before. But she remembered the first time. And she remembered it differently than I did. I remembered it being very calm, and there was a single tear. And I went in, and I'm surprised they didn't call DSS. It was crazy. She was I'd never even seen her this way. She was screaming. She was waving her arms. She was swinging at me. She's like, "Don't touch my foot!" And I was like, "Oh, but this is like last time." And she's like, "No!" And she was and Kim came in and Kim tried to kind of restrain her. And I mean, I'm talking tiny splinter, right? I probably, if I just squeezed her toe, it would have shot out. And we were just fighting all over and finally I stopped and I was like, okay, let's just not worry about the splinter. Let's just leave it in there. And she's like crying. She's like, then she wants a hug. And I remember hugging her and I was like, what happened? We've already done this before. But the next time I tried to draw closer to her to take that splinter out, man, she was like, no way, because I remember what happened last time. And what's so interesting about, and I appreciate that you led that song nearer, what is it so interesting about drawing closer to God is that sometimes one of the scariest places to draw closer to is God because there's always an unknown factor about what you're drawing closer to. You don't know God's plans. You don't know how a thing's going to work out. And generally speaking, the one thing my daughter did know is that it was safer to have her splinter out. Right? No one, because you know what she had to get? She had kind of it was like pseudo infection, it starts really painful. And for us as Christians, I think sometimes it's like we know that we need to be nearer to God. But whenever we think about the fact that, man, it's been a while since I've really spent time with him in prayer, it's been I pick up that book Sunday or Sunday, it's like I haven't really, my relationship is waning. And even folks who believe in Jesus and who worship him and who are followers of his, my relationship with them are even a little bit strained. And when we think about getting closer to that relationship and drawing closer again, sometimes we're a little standoffish because maybe coming back was a little bit bumpy. But in the end, we know it was good for us. And in Exodus chapter 3, Moses is in the middle of drawing nearer to something. You remember this story from Exodus. And he's drawing nearer to a bush, as he says, is burning but is not being consumed. And then earlier in the chapter before, you get kind of the history of Moses, right? Moses being born to the house of Levi, and at that point there was like mass genocide for males, Hebrew boys going on, and his mom, she wanted to protect him. So as you'll remember, she made a basket and she put him in that basket and she floated him into the waters, just kind of hoping that something would happen. Just something. And something did happen. Some of the household of the Egyptian Pharaoh brought him into the house and picked him up and basically just raised him as the son. In verse number 10 of chapter 2, it says, "And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, Because I drew him out of the water." And I'm sure that you remember the rest of the story. What's funny is what's covered in one chapter. If you watch Charlton Heston's version, it's covered in like 4 hours. But here Moses, he grows up in the household, but it's not long before Moses, knowing who he is, his own identity, looking out and seeing how his Hebrew brothers are treated, that he wants to get involved. And when he gets involved, things go upside down, which ultimately lead to him having to leave the place that he is, leave Egypt and be on the run, kind of a vagabond. And here we find him tending his father-in-law's flock in verse number 1 of chapter 3. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight. This word, it means this amazing sight, miraculous sight, while the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not draw near to this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Set apart. It's different. Verse 6. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face from him, for he was afraid to look upon him. And this word afraid, it can mean that you are fearful of something or that you have respect and awe. I tend to think it's the latter, since in verse number 3 it says that he this great sight, it was such an amazing sight that it cast an awe to what he was saying. In verse number 7 it says, And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. You've heard this story. Again, I just put in a plug for the Ten Commandments. You've probably seen that old movie. I've seen it so many times. But what's interesting is that when you see Moses approach this bush, even in your own head, you think to yourself, this is a safe thing to draw near to. But I don't know why in the world we would ever think it's a safe thing to draw near to. If any of us walked outside and saw that tree on fire, but it was just on fire, I don't think any of us would go, I think I want to go near and see this strange sight. I don't, um, my sister loves horror movies. No one else in our family does, but some of the older ones that, were just like, oh, somebody jump out of your closet. But she was really into horror movies. And, and she was kind of one of those people that I think if she was in the horror movie, you know how like when bad things happen in them, there's always at least one person who wants to go toward the danger, right? They step out of the house, they're screaming in dark woods with no light, and there's always a group of people and they're like, what do we do? And there's always one person who's like, I think we should go into the woods. They're screaming, screeching, and it's really dark. We should run there. And that's what lifts the movie, right? There's always some people who want to go there, but there's always somebody who's like, that seems like a really bad move, right? And I think if I were Moses, I would look at a bush that's burning but not being consumed as like a really bad move. I wouldn't want to go near it. Now, I might think it's amazing. I might want to talk about it. In this day and time, we would all take a picture, we would post it, but you wouldn't go near it. So it always sort of makes me wonder why Moses even bothered. Because think about what the text said. Moses now has a family. Earlier in or the end of chapter 2, it says that he has a son, he has a wife. In verse 21, then Moses was content to live with the man. He gave Zipporah his daughter to Moses, and she bore him a son. He was called Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. This is kind of a risk. And you may say, maybe we're blowing this out of proportion. It's just a bush. It's on fire. It's not being consumed. The fact that he had time to notice that the bush was burning up, like if you walk out and you see the tree on fire, it's on fire. But you have to spend some time to notice that the bush is burning and it's not burning up. So he is that interested to invest time in it. I think after you saw that, you have time to start weighing things. Okay, should I approach? I do have something to live for. Remember, he has been cast out of the land that he lived, and this is where he lived now. Not to mention, he now is in a better position. It's not that Moses didn't come from a place of wealth in the palace, not a place of wealth with the Pharaoh, but he's not in one now. And he is left there, almost you could just imagine like an exile himself leaving there. Now he is in what I would feel like a pretty stable environment, a pretty stable place, right? He's with the Sheik of Midian. He's financially stable. He's given him his daughter, and here he is. Does he really want to go near it? And then if you consider how he left his kind of in verses 14 and 15, people saying like, what do you think, you're a prince and a judge over us? That's not what he was gunning for. Also, what do they know that he is? A murderer. He's a murderer. He killed someone. But here he's in this place where he kind of gets to be unknown, and he can just be the survivor that he was from birth when he didn't die, and being able to escape Egypt. If anything, right now, Moses is in a safe place. He's in a safe place. And I think sometimes for us, when we consider drawing nearer to God, or when maybe we've gone away a little bit and we consider coming back, one of the things that kind of holds us in the place that we are is we have this feeling that we are safe. We may not, maybe there's some tension there and we may rock the boat with our family, or there's a financial component, or man, we just kind of like being unknown and anonymous. We feel safe and we don't really want to come back. But I think what Moses shows us is that even when you consider his family, you consider where he's come from, that's what's important. It's where he's come from. What Moses remembered is who he actually was, not who in present time he is. Remember when Zipporah and I assume the rest of his daughters go back to the Sheik of Midian and they tell him who they found or who has helped them at the well, they don't refer to him as the Hebrew man. They refer to him as the Egyptian. but he knows that's not really who he is. And it's the fact that Moses maintained the entire time who he actually was. He never forgot it. That's what makes this encounter with the bush feel like an okay thing to do. Exodus 2:11, it says, "Now it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out to his brethren and he looked at their burdens." Calls them brethren because he knows who they are. He knows that they are connected by heritage. And he sees their burdens, which means that he understands what they're carrying on their backs that he is not. Moses doesn't forget who he is. And I think sometimes it becomes pretty easy for us as Christians to sort of forget the main purpose. It's like I was telling you in James, like sometimes you wake up and you go, oh, wait, this life is short. There is a purpose. Here's what I must do. I know I have all these other obligations, but the primary focus is this. But it's clear that even though all these things that were happening to him, he did not forget about it. He may have had a wealthy father-in-law, but it's also clear that Moses, he understood when he was in the presence of what was holy. You may look at the Sheik of Midian and say, well, you're an impressive individual. I don't know how impressive he thought it was compared to Pharaoh, but he may look at him and say, you're a powerful individual. I am in a good place. And this is all true. But he understood that he was in the presence of something far greater. Far greater. And sure, the bush kind of symbolizes this thing that was far greater. But did you notice that as the angel's presence is in the bush and the bush is illuminating and it's on fire, as the text says, as Moses draws nearer to the bush, then it says, then God comes. It's like this triangulation of God now communicating with Moses. And how did he address him? Did he say, who are you? No. He knew who Moses was. He calls out to him, Moses, Moses. See, there's probably been no one else in Moses' entire life who knows him without having any other interaction with him or somebody next to him. It would freak you out too if you take yourself to another city that you've never been to. We all pack, I'm just going to guess, I don't know, we've been to Iceland, I don't know, so like half of you have after that. You're like, oh, my family's from Iceland. So we all packed up and went to Reykjavik, and we were like, we step out of the airport, and the second you step out, somebody's like, hey, Monty, how's it going? You're like, how do you know me? Especially if you never met them. But he's just bumped into someone who knows his name, and he knows every single thing about him. Everything. He knows what he's thinking. He knows what his strengths and his weaknesses are. In fact, his conversation with God about his weaknesses don't come as a surprise to God. He's like, I know what you're about. And he knew that he was standing in a place that was holy ground. And not necessarily at this point. I would argue it's not because of the dirt they were standing on necessarily, but it was the substance of the character of the individual who was with him. And I think both of these points are very important for us. Like this building's not holy, but it is the presence of God that makes everything holy. Our families aren't holy, but it's the presence of God within our families that make it holy, because holy means set apart, means different, called out for the right reason. And this place is holy because the presence of God is in the place, and I think he gets that. He gets that at least something far greater than anything he has known is, and he hears it whenever he hears the words, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's unclear how much Moses knew about his Hebrew heritage, but I can tell you that this phrase is one that is repeated over and over and over in the scriptures, because the sort of major three promises that were given to Abraham, one ending in the biggest promise, which is the seed that all would be blessed through Jesus Christ. These promises have been blessed through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And after hearing that this is the God of them, he would know that he is in an exceptional company. And then he hears this individual tell him that he has seen the misery of his people who are in Egypt. See, that's something Jethro couldn't do. Jethro may hear about it by hearsay, but he doesn't hear the individual cries of the people. He was not God. He didn't make a place holy because he showed up. People likely bowed to a sheik. It's possible. But he wasn't him. And then one of the most powerful things that I think he hears God say is he says, I have come down. Hope you don't miss that. He says, I have come down. Come down to do a thing. And later, it's this foreshadow for what Moses will get when the tabernacle is built. He'll say the same thing. He will say, I build this tabernacle because I want to come down and be with the people. He said, I want to come down and commune with the people. And when he hears this, he knows that this is far greater than anything he has ever encountered. And so the idea of just trying to run from maybe being a ruler or a murderer or just escaping your birth or whatever happened in Egypt. He knew that now he was being given a purpose. You know, in one sense, he did leave Egypt without an identity, but he left Egypt without the identity that he probably wanted. How many of you would like to, go to school and somebody refers to you as a murderer? Probably not. Probably. Sometimes when you're at work and, like everything's kind of dragging along and people really aren't carrying their weight and you kind of get tired of it. So you kind of throw some on your back and get plunging. Then people refer to you as, so apparently you think you're going to be the next boss, right? You think you're going to get promoted, right? And it's like, no. And these are tags that you don't really love. He probably really didn't enjoy those. But here he was being given a new identity and a new purpose. Chapter 3 and verse 10, God says, so now go. He says, I am sending you. He's about to be one who is sent to do a job. He had a new purpose. And he tells him in verse number 12, and you will worship God on this mountain. You are one who is being sent to do a job. You are one who will be given the ability, the capacity, you will be given the chance to worship the Almighty God who is speaking to you. You'll be able to do that. And listen, that's just not something that everyone is just granted to do. But God opened it up to him. And then lastly, this felt safe. If it were me, I would have felt plenty safe just moving on. I was in a safe place. All the things that were mentioned before were safe. But I think as Moses could hear these words, what he probably understood very quickly is that now, after coming into the presence of this God, now he's feeling what safety is really like. Now he's feeling what safety is really like. I was watching it's like a YouTube clip popped up for me about this poor man, and I guess he was going in maybe 2020 to have like the vaccine, right? And I guess this was his wife who's videoing him. He was afraid of needles. And he was, I mean, he's a grown man. He sat down in the chair and everything looked fine. And the lady came in, she said, could you raise your sleeve up? And he raised, and then you could see how nervous he was. He raised one sleeve up, raised the other up, and then he started pushing them both down. And while she was getting it ready, he was just like flailing his arms, right? And she said, okay, are you ready? And he was like, yeah, I'm ready. And he raises it up, and she just like puts her hand on his shoulder, and he jerks, almost tips the chair over, and he says, are you sure you know what you're doing? And she said, yeah, I know. I'm a medical professional. I do this all the time. He goes, how many have you done? And she's kind of dumbfounded. She doesn't know what to say. She goes, I do this every day. He goes, okay. And he gets his arm up, and she goes at him again, and he jumps back again. Almost really, the chair's almost tipping. And he says, has anybody died from this? And he's just flipping out. So he said, no, you're going to use the other shoulder. So she walks over there and she said, now, if I walk over here, you have to really let me give you the shot. He goes, okay, okay, okay. And she lines up to give him the shot. And this poor guy, he slimes out of the chair. It's like watching Looney Tunes, right? Like slimes out of the chair and slithers into the floor. And she says, I'm going to be honest, I'm not giving the shot to you while you're in the floor. And his wife, who's holding the camera, she's like, get back in the chair. And he is telling her, this isn't safe. It's not safe. So he eventually climbs back up into the chair, and he's now sort of like whimpering. He's like, get it over with, get it over with. And this lady, she has like just the best way about her. She says she starts to give him the shot. He's all over the place, and she says, oh wait, I'm sorry. What's your birthday? And he was like, oh, my birthday is, and she hits him, gives him the shot, and he's like, why did you do that? And she pulls it out. And it made me think that as this man was driving, he when he was in the car with his wife, he was like, this is a safe space. This is a safe space. And he got out of the car and he was probably still with his wife and he thought, I'm still in a safe space. But when they went in there and he sat in the chair and his wife backed up and held the camera, he was like, I'm not safe anymore. I can't trust her. This is not safe. And what the lady did for him is what God does for us. He reminds us that this is the safe space. He is the great physician. That wherever you were and whoever you think makes you safe and whatever you think makes you like invincible, he says, no, that doesn't really matter. I'm going to show you what safety is. And as the lady says, what's your birthday? It's kind of like Jesus said, like, who are you? What is your name? Oh, you're a disciple. You're a Christian. Now you're safe. Now you're safe. And I think that's what Moses could he clearly see in chapter 3 and verse number 7. He said, I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. Moses was concerned about their suffering, but he didn't have the power that God did. And now he's talking to someone who's holy, who has infinite power, and he is concerned about their suffering. Moses can know, I'm now talking to somebody who brings safety to people. Verse number 8, he says, so I have come down to rescue them, bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Not lane, but land. He says, I've come down to rescue them. Now think about this. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who dwells in unapproachable light, has come down to rescue people. People. He's so concerned about each and every one of those people who are being afflicted that he has come down from where he is to rescue them. You think this doesn't shake Moses? And not only just rescue them, but take them to a place that is far beyond their comprehension. Take them to a place that contrasts Egypt so well. To take them from a place of slavery and think about what it was like to be a slave in Egypt, waking up every day, feeling a little more hopeless every day. But I'm going to take them to a spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. He knows this is safe. In verse number 9, he says, and now the cry of Israelites it's reached me. In other words, I'm not muting my ears to them. And he tells them in verse number 12, I will be with you. He can trust this God. It doesn't matter what happened in Egypt, he can trust this individual. And see, that's why we have to ask ourselves, like, what would we have done? What would we have done? Would we have drawn closer to that bush or would we have run? Because simply put, sometimes the scariest place to go is towards God. Sometimes the scariest place to go is towards God because we don't know all the answers. But we don't have to. We don't have to know all of the answers, and if drawing closer to God makes us feel that we're clashing with our family or our financial situation or our ability to kind of like stay below the radar or just be safe, the Lord has something to say about that. He says, look, if it's clashing with our family, remember what Matthew 10:37 said. It says, "He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." Luke 14:26, at the end, it says a similar thing, but at the end it says, "He cannot be my disciple." And you think about it in terms like the way you read that, the way the sentence is structured, almost like, if you love father or mother more than me, then I'm not letting you in my club. Can't be in the disciple club. You can't be in the disciple club. No, read it the other way around. He's saying it's an impossibility. He says, if you value others more than you value me, then you can't follow me properly. You're not going to be able to. You're just not. One of my kids, her head's always on a swivel, and she likes to just look at anything that goes by. It's like squirrel, bird, gnat, anything could just totally get her attention. If you want to keep her focused, it's hard, and it's hilarious as it happens, right? But we have been places like hiking and things like that, and as we're walking along, we'll say, "Hey, make sure you follow me." She's like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah." And if you look back, she could be in the woods like 10 miles up because like a butterfly went by, right? She's like, everything. Everything makes her look away. And it's not that I said, "Hey, if you don't look at me, if you don't keep your eyes on me, then you're not allowed to hike with me." That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying if you don't keep your eyes on me and you don't focus on me, you're not going to be able to follow me because you don't know the way. Jesus says, "Listen, if, when you draw near to me, don't let anything else get in your way." You could say, man, and look, this is hard. As I'm parenting kids who are older, I notice that there is even a stronger pull from like the world around them, and I understand because I was that age, right? You know, there were things in pop culture I wanted to keep up with. There were all these things outside, like I wanted to be able to do it all, and it's hard. And even as a parent, it's hard to go, okay, this is okay, no, not that, that's bad. To try to help people navigate. But if you simply, even as a parent, and you know this from all you parents, you just simply give into everything because maybe your child doesn't even know what's coming. But if you just gave into everything, where would you lead them? I mean, it might be easier, but you wouldn't be drawing near to God. I think that's one reason why in Proverbs it says, "Train up a child in the way that they will go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it." We are responsible for leading our folks to Jesus and helping them draw closer to God. And as we draw closer to God, we leave the right example in front of them, right? I think there are far fewer children and even teenagers who just go to the Lord on their own without some sort of example to watch. But if they see us as parents and uncles and grandparents, like just sort of flirting around and running away from the Lord, not really staying focused, it's like, but why should I? Why should I? Matthew chapter 6 and verse number 24, as it relates maybe, as you think about the security that he had, it says, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other." He said, "You cannot serve God and money." I remember early off when we were doing mission work, someone said to me, they said, just so you know, the longer you spend time with some of the people groups, they're going to see you because you come from the U.S. as like a giant piggy bank. Now, they're like, now you yourself may not see yourself as a giant piggy bank in the U.S. You may be like, where can I borrow someone's piggy bank, right? You may feel like that in the U.S. They said, but here they see you as a giant piggy bank. So just so you know, they'll probably ask you for things a lot. And in the beginning, I could see this. The more I become friendly with some groups, work with some groups, some churches, then it felt like people would always have something that they needed to tell me about that was a need. And I was like, why do they always come to me for this need? But any Christian who'd ever read through the book of Acts, they probably would have found themselves in Acts chapter 2 when they were having all things in common, before the Ananias and Sapphira slip up, right? They would have read this and would have seen how the church community came together to help other folks who were in need. And it hit me that they probably said, well, it's strange that I have to ask. Like, shouldn't a Christian looking at another Christian in need just volunteer their effort, their time, their money? Like, they wouldn't even need to ask. But the fact that they were asking should seem strange to them. It became clear. He said, no one can serve two masters. And it's not that you can't serve two masters because you have to get on the fence with one or the other when it comes to money and God. But actually, he says you'll grow into this place where you'll hate one and love the other. You'll be devoted to one and the other. It's like you're on the seesaw, right? He says you're going to slide to one direction or the other. In fact, the Lord says it's not possible to stay on the fulcrum. And if, if finances keep us from drawing near to God, He's told us that we'll die with this money. But in the afterlife, it's not there for. Like the rich man and Lazarus, he struggled after because he had no power in the Hadean realm. He lifted up his eyes in torment, and he couldn't just whip some gold coins out and pay his way out of there. There was nothing he could do. But it was based on the relationship that he had gained with the Lord, which was non-existent. And he could have said, Moses could have said, hey man, I just want to be anonymous. And I know that sometimes the sentiment is like, we are here to go to heaven. That's what we're here for. We're here to die and go to heaven. It's like our purpose. Like we're gathered here today to talk about God so we can die, so we can go to heaven. And so we kind of have this feeling that we just want to live here on earth in peace, die and go to heaven. And then in heaven we'll receive our reward and the deal is done. But that's not the whole story. You may even look at like 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse number 1 and 2, where it says, first of all, then I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, thanksgiving be made for all people. But listen to verse number 2, Julian. For kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. What God wants is for us just to be at peace, chill, quiet, die, go to heaven. The problem is that Timothy just kept writing. He just kept writing. And he happened to write two more verses at the end of this passage in verse number 3, where he says, this is good and it is pleasing in the sight of our God, our Savior, verse number 4, who desires all people to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. You see, he needs for people to hear about the truth. Somebody's got to tell them about the truth. Someone has to, spend their financial means to distribute Bibles. Someone has to look at the Bible, teach it, open up their mouth, encourage other people to read it and study it. Like he says, if your goal is just to be as peaceful as you can, quiet, hurry up and die and go to heaven, he said, yeah, but there's actually quite a bit to do here on earth. You can't be anonymous. And Moses couldn't just say, the thing is, Lord, my speech is not great. I'm not that good of a speaker. I'm not great. Moses said, great, I got something for you. It's called your brother. He's great. Move on. Next. Who do I say is sending me, Lord? I'm a nobody. Who should I say is sending me? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yeah, but when they ask specifically, like, who am, the I am is sending. I am that I am. And later in the passage, he quotes again and he says that I have existed forever and will always exist. That's who's sending you. He says you're not allowed to remain anonymous. And guess what? We're not either. We're not either. We don't get to just kind of just bury ourselves and say Christian number 4 on our chest and just ride it out and say nothing and do nothing and just wait for the trump to sound and the whole thing to be rolled up like a cloud. That's not it. He says no, there's plenty for us to be doing. 2 Corinthians 5:11 says, knowing therefore the terror of the Lord. What does it say? Paul said, we persuade men. That's our job. We can't be anonymous because we have to be busy persuading men. We can't hide because we have to be busy persuading men. That's a job that requires some effort. 2 Corinthians 5:14, it says, for the love of Christ controls us because we have concluded this, that one has died for all. That's Jesus. Therefore, all have died, and he died for all. And those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. It's not just for us. That's a problem. We can't just live in and to ourselves and like get in the turtle shell and just I'm gonna hang out here and wait. No, he says actually there's work to be done. And Moses had a ton of work to do. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old is passed away, behold, the new has come. See, Moses could not just say, I'm known as a murderer. I'm known as someone who's trying to maybe rule over them. I just barely escaped Egyptian control. I almost died there. I almost died as a baby. The old has passed away, the new has come. We draw closer to God. Sometimes we have baggage that we're drawing back with, and we're like, I'm not really sure this is a good time to draw near to God. I think I should fix A, B, C, and then I'll come back. I know the Lord will be happier with me when I come back to him then. The Lord knows about the future you, right? He knows about you in 2 weeks. He knows about you in a month if you live, you in 3 years if you live, and he knew about the you 10 months ago. He's not concerned about the future you. He's concerned about you in the present. For the Lord, it's the same because he knows all times. So attempting to, quote, fix ourselves before we come back to him only gives the devil time to work in your heart. It's true. And he says, don't worry about the old man, move forward. 1 Corinthians 6:19, he said, or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. You're not your own. Can't just be anonymous. You're not just for you, Moses. I will use you to deliver my people. There's a job for you. And church is a job for each and every one of us. And lastly, the safety. Man, Isaiah 41:10 says, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. Can anybody else promise you that sort of thing? Oh, they can't. They can't promise you this. It just so happens that this is what the Lord was saying to Israel. And you may say, yeah, but didn't Israel go through a lot? Man, they were in bondage, but look how he brought them through. The Lord doesn't do anything by accident. Everything's intentional. He is requiring our surrender and our trust. And then we always seem to see things come out on the other side. Psalm 73:28 says, but for me it is good to be near God. I have made the Lord God my refuge, that I may tell of all your works. Hebrews 7:25, it says, consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who do what? Who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. God is looking for us to draw near to him. That's what Joe was saying. He desires that. We need to draw closer to God and not worry about where he's drawing us to. Abraham, leave the land of Ur of the Chaldeans, get up and leave the land where you are. I'll show you where to go. I would have been like, and where is that exactly? How do I get there? I'll show you where to go. Moses, I need you to go and through you, I'm going to help free the children of Israel. I'm going to free them from Egyptian bondage. You have to imagine, like, such a crazy thing has never been done. Like, there's no way looking at that they could ever be free. That's what I'm going to do, Moses. But even as Moses is there in front of the bush, the thing is he can't see the future. In church, we can't either. We just have to trust as we draw near to God that he's got it figured out already. And that's the good thing. The word gives us comfort that he does, because he's never messed up. He's never messed up. The children of Israel, they were a lot like this burning bush, right? Afflicted but not destroyed. They'd been through a ton, but they were still there. There was a remnant of them there. They were still there. and the Lord was going to save them. As Moses is there, he doesn't realize that he's on the Mount of God, but he doesn't realize that he's coming back to Mount Sinai to receive commandments. He doesn't know this. He can't see the future. But in hindsight, we get to know. Deuteronomy 4:20 says, "But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron furnace, out of Egypt, to be his people, an inheritance as you are this day." Oh, if the children of Israel could have seen this, if they'd known this, when their hardship began, as Joseph died, and it said a Pharaoh came up who did not know them, who did not know of Joseph, and the relationship turned around because he looked around and he said, "Look at all these people, look at all these shepherds in the land of Goshen. Look at all of them. I'm afraid like they could have an uprising here and this everything turned around only if they had known there's nothing to worry about. Because in X days the Lord will send Moses and Aaron to deliver his people out of bondage. It's going to happen. They probably would have had a different feeling. Like us. If you'd known everything in the future, you may have had a different feeling. But there's a reason why we don't know everything in the future, because that different feeling may not be the right one. If you knew everything that would happen in the future, I'm pretty certain we would act differently. And God knows this. He knows this. And then you ask yourself, how close do you really want to be to God? How close do you want to be to God? And whatever your answer is, I would just say that you need to move quickly in his direction, like Moses. And if you've never pondered this question, I pray that you will. Think about it today. How close do I want to be to God? I always wondered, at the end of time, if the Lord asked me, he's like, "Hey, could you tell me your favorite part in that book you're reading? Do you have a favorite part?" Now, of course you do. But a lot of people who proclaim the name of Jesus who've hardly ever cracked the book that gives us full perspective about gives us perspective about who he is. What's your favorite part in that book? The part. God knows. God knows if you know who he is, at least up until the point that he's given you information, but he knows everything about you. And he knows how close you want to be to him. He knows how close you are to him. And hear me, please. There is a difference between where you are and where you want to be. And through faith and trust in him, then you'll get there where we could all be closer. But he also knows if we're in a place and we look at the place that we could be and we're just not willing to go. We have no plans in it. We have no intentions to get there. We don't want to be any closer than we are right now because we're content. I would suggest that we move quickly in his direction like Moses. We say, "Man, here's a bush and it's on fire and I don't even know what's going on with it and it's burning up, but I'm going there. I'm going to go there." We can go there through prayer. Like Moses, remember his holiness, like see who he is, observe, through the prayer, look at all what your prayer has done for me. Like just remember these things. Look around through prayer. You can observe who the Lord is. Reading and studying, these are obvious things, but they help us to never forget his words. They help us to not forget who he is. There's that passage of scripture that you read when you were a kid and you're trying to think of it now and you're like, "Man, I already forgot it." It's because these things kind of just blow away. Romans 12:1 and 2 tell us that we have to stay engaged and continuing to show hospitality to each other, encouraging each other. Oh man, encouraging each other, teaching people. That helps us remember our purpose here. Helps us remember. Don't be hesitant to draw near to God, but instead draw closer to him. This morning, I hope this lesson, I hope it sticks with you, and I hope the question, how close do you want to be to God, echoes in your head today and throughout this week, and you continue to think about that question. And wherever you are in your this long relationship with him, just like a relationship with any of your friends that you want to be closer to, or your kids, parents, aunts, uncles, nieces, aunts that you like, "Man, I want to be closer to them." I pray that your desire to grow closer to God is the one that dominates them all. And that no matter what the blocker is, you will push it out of the way and draw closer to him, as Joe said, as he wants to pull you closer to him. So if we can help you in any way, if we can pray for you, if you're ready to become a child of God, please come as we stand together and we sing together.